Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are again on Good Times Friday. Not Good Time, it is Good Times. It's End Times Friday.
We have a good time talking about it, right? But yes, End Times Friday.
End Times Friday. And we've, week after week, we've been kind of dealing with a variety of subjects as we, observe things and know what's going on, talk about what's going on, the implication of what's going on. And so that's been really healthy, I think, in terms of just bringing people up to speed and understanding it. And I know that
watching the signs,
last time when we ended, and I've made a comment, and I made this comment several times, that there's a purposeful movement toward one world government, one currency,
right?
And then, that because of the dynamics going on, that there's China, Russia, others that are buying gold and silver to get ready for stability with what they have to offer, and the value of that, by the way, because if in a serious downturn gold and silver values go way high, I mean they predict it could go up 10 times, 20 times, 30 times higher than that is today in a real serious downturn. So if you have gold and silver, it's one of those things that's called a hedge, that while everything else is worth less, or worth literally less than you thought, gold and silver are going to be worth a lot more than you thought.
Right.
And so you can cover it. So you had an interesting question about that. So raise that up, and then we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So you were talking about the fact that in the one world government, one world currency is likely to be cryptocurrency. And then we're also having this conversation about gold. And so my question is this: I hear a lot of Christians who do buy physical gold, not just as a hedge, but literally buying gold coins in preparation for end times and that sort of thing. And my question is, if the world moves to a one world cryptocurrency, what is the value of having the gold itself? How does that play out? Can you reconcile that for me and show me why it would be a good idea or not a good idea?
Yes,
and
sure.
Help that make sense.
Yeah, there's a variety of thoughts about that in terms of different levels. So that generally speaking, let's say that I own gold and silver, literally owned it, and normally, if I wanted to what's called convert it, because I can't take it down to the grocery store.
Right. You have to take it to someone and sell it.
Somebody has to give me the current currency of the things that I buy, and it's called an exchange rate. So that the more valuable it becomes, the more I'm going to get of that, whatever that currency is. So that's how they measure the value today of the value of gold is for us. It's in dollars.
Right.
So if I wanted to sell an ounce of gold or a pound of gold or silver, there's brokers. I would hand them my stuff. They hand me dollars.
Right.
And now I can.
So would the same then be said for cryptocurrency?
Well,
if we're on a one world system of cryptocurrency?
Yes, it will be. So at the level of conversion, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what you call it. You can call it the Deutschmark, call it the euro, call it the yuan, call it the ruble. It'll have a value based upon the perceived value of gold or silver, which is going to get higher. So if I said, well, the currency that I need to use is euro, let's say, Well, instead of me converting it to dollars, I could literally convert it to euro and buy whatever euros can buy me. So yes, the gold and silver per se will be convertible into whatever currency it is, including a one world government cryptocurrency.
Okay.
There will be a value associated with gold and silver, and the reason is that it's a limited resource. It's a limited commodity, and it's not like I can convert dirt, to currency, because, well, there's an endless supply of dirt. So I'm not going to give you anything for that dirt because, one, I can't use it. Why? Well, because I can go down the street and get my own dirt. But if you have gold, I can't get gold a lot because it's limited. So yeah, there's a value to that, and it's all perception. I had I had a great joke. I heard a great joke because I don't know if you remember when we talked about the new heaven and new earth. The streets, it's called paved with gold.
Right.
Okay, so there was a rich guy, and he was gonna die, and he had wound up talking to an angel, and he said, I really would like to bring with me stuff that I have here because it's valuable, and is it okay? He said, well, in heaven you don't need it. And he says, well, I really want to bring it with me, and I know you can't supposedly take it with you, but I'd like to take it with me. Okay, I've checked. Okay, you can't. So he dies, goes to heaven, and St. Peter's there, and St. Peter says, why did you bring roads? Why did you bring material for roads? We got plenty of roads. You brought stuff for roads. I don't understand that. So that it's all perception. It's all perception.
Right.
Of what's available, because it's precious. It's called a precious metal. There's value to it, and until the very, very end, there will be ability to convert it, into something. Okay, now it raises a couple of questions. If I'm a believer, that becomes valuable up until, which we're gonna get in here too.
Yeah,
this is what I week or two is up until the mark of the beast.
Right.
So
and then everything changes.
It really doesn't matter. I could have all the gold I have in the world, but if I don't have the mark of the beast, I can't trade. I don't have the ability to trade. I have to join the system to be able to trade, so that just because I have it, I also have to have the mark of the beast in order to participate in the system. If I have gold, which I could convert, but I don't have the mark of the beast to join the system,
right,
it's worthless. Now, there is a potential value. And I think this will be interesting, something we're going to process a little bit further and talk about it. But for believers who don't take the mark of the beast, we don't participate in the economic system.
Right.
So
and we'll have to kind of come up with our own network of community that we're able to work in some sort of economic system with our own people.
And it'll be a barter system. It'll be, I'll give you this and you give me that, and I'll work for you here and I'll provide this. And think of, there's a couple of TV shows that maybe you've seen, is, the Waltons, Little House on the Prairie. Fundamentally,
I used to love those shows.
Yeah, they had some income, but fundamentally, it was a barter system.
Right.
It was, I'll do this for you, and you do that for me. So I think some of the things that could be bartered will be things like gold and silver. That, hey, I'll give you this, and you can use that to exchange it for something else, and materials and supplies and a variety of things that will trade back and forth. And by the way, an economy, interesting enough, establishes a value for that. There's a hierarchy of, how much is that toilet paper worth versus a bar of gold.
Right.
Well, there's a value to that. and we wind up with what's called a closed society economy, then we decide the value of those things that we now barter. So gold and silver may still be one of those things. Now we can't do anything with it ultimately, other than
that's what's interesting to
other
me,
than
right?
to trade it. But just like you can't do anything with that toilet paper, really, other than, hey, I'll give you that if you give me this. And it's an exchange process of how it works. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, and we'll talk about that, about what is that barter system going to look like for non-believers, and are we going to make it? What if we don't participate in this? I mean, that's a big question. If we don't participate in the system, isn't it over for us?
What's that going to look like, right?
You know, and all I can tell you is Scripture says, no, it's not over. It's interesting. Now, I haven't yet received, well, then how is it going to work? I don't have that answer yet, other than it works. Because there's people that don't take the mark of the beast, and they're still living, and they don't just all die because they can't do anything. Something happened, something.
And community matters.
Community matters. Yeah. Now, in the meantime, before the tribulation, and before the one world currency, and before the mark of the beast, it may have wisdom to have gold and silver, because if everything goes down, that's going to go up, and whatever currency we have, which we'll still participate in, we could trade that gold and silver in for that and get value for it and do things with it during that time.
Up until that time.
Up until that time. So it's not a bad thing. It's a matter of my recommendation is, and it doesn't matter what you say, what you have, but it's hedge. As you think about investment, hedge it. Be careful that you haven't focused on, well, look at the stock market. Look at home building. I'm going to invest in home building.
Right.
Well, yeah, you know what? That's going to end, and it's going to go down. So I wouldn't put all my money into that. I'd put some where when that goes down, what's going to go up? And that's the beauty of hedging, so that you don't look at, well, yeah, but I could have made a lot more money in the short term. Yeah, that's true.
Right. You're really looking at the net of the whole thing.
In the long term, you're way better off, because you're not going to lose everything when it tanks.
Right.
So it's really, really significant. So we're talking about the beast, and the discussion about the harlot, the cabal creates the beast. The beast has the Antichrist, and ultimately steps into as the dictator of the beast, and it becomes synonymous with the beast. So we got to be careful we don't mix and match these terms, because a lot of people thought the mark of the beast is the mark of the Antichrist.
Right.
Interesting enough, it's not. It's the mark of a system. Now he becomes the head of that system, but it's like, well, we'll know with the Antichrist, and if he asks me to take a mark, I'm not going to take it. Interesting enough, by that time it's way too late. You've already taken the mark of the beast.
Because we don't even really know who the Antichrist is until halfway through the tribulation, correct?
Right, we're going to see that in here in Daniel 7. So let's go to Daniel 7. And first of all, just start with 7 and 8. Daniel's starting to get some insight about this. So go to Daniel 7, 7 and 8.
Okay. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking pompous words.
Okay. So he's been given the vision of all the beasts. The first 3 are the basically the regimes of Persia, the Greeks, and then the Romans that wound up ruling the world together. But they were national. They were governmental. By I'm Roman, so I'm going to run the Roman Empire. I'm Greek, I'm going to run the Greek Empire. I'm Persia, so I'm going to run the Persian Empire. He says here, and then, by the way, he saw all these before they all happened. So it happened now after he passed. over the next 400 to 600 years.
Right. So we've seen that part of the prophecy fulfilled.
We've seen that fulfilled, but he saw it ahead of time.
He saw it ahead.
We've seen what it meant. Then he says, I saw a fourth beast, different, terrible and dreadful, exceedingly strong, devouring, breaking in pieces, trampling the residue with his feet. And then it makes a statement. It was different from all the other beasts. Okay, so we know something about that then. What he saw here, and remember he's seeing, in which we're going to be able to relate to, we're seeing the beast at the very, very end during the tribulation. So we know by definition it's 2,500 years later after he's seen this.
Right.
But he noticed that's different than the other three that I just saw. Okay, so let's look at some of the differences. One, it actually isn't a country that tries to establish power on a world basis, and through war or taking over or conquering, because that's actually how the rest of those did.
That's how the other three did.
The other three did. Now he said this one is trampling things under his feet. So you would think, well, isn't that war? No, it's not. We're going to see here it's actually spiritual. And who's being trampled is believers. Because during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, actually, the reason the world readily accepts it is they don't see this as being destructive. They see it as being a solution. And so it's a different thing. So he says it's different. It's not a nation who's conquering by war and power. It's something else. And he says it had 10 horns. And he says, in verse 8, he says, I'm thinking about that. What's that? What are those horns about? What's that? He says, I saw a little one, another horn. Okay, so again, just follow along. He sees the 10.
Right.
And then he sees what?
One little one coming
another
up
one,
them.
Not one of those 10.
Right.
I see another one coming up among them. So he's there, but he's not one of the 10. But he's inside the system, and he's a player in the system, but not identified even as one of the 10 leaders.
Right.
So that's interesting. And then he says, I saw him come up, and he had the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking pompous words. So then and God showed him that's the Antichrist. It's a person. So the horns are people. Okay, the horns are 10 heads of something. Not government. It's not a government. There's a whole new system to it. What I believe it probably is more of a corporate entity. It's different factions, like maybe the head of Microsoft and Google and other things like Amazon. There's Alibaba in China. There's all kinds of worldwide players that actually, interesting enough,
have significant power and influence. And
they have way more money than countries. And they're not in debt, actually, interesting enough. They actually have money. So I see them being the player. So it's going to be a beast. It's going to be different. It's not going to be national. It's not going to be by conquering. It's going to be something else. But he's trampling things, and the things he's trampling is the life of God and the people of God. That's underneath it. Okay, now jump down to verse 15 and read through 28.
Sure. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to one of those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great beasts, which are four kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet, and the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints, and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. And then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. This is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly troubled me, and my countenance changed, but I kept the matter in my heart.
Okay. So he describes it. He says that I'm looking at this, understanding the fourth beast.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that, yes, it's against the saints, but the saints are going to receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. So he's talking about spiritual stuff, and that we who are believers and followers of Christ, even though we're going to have some difficulty, the good news is we're going to, in eternity, we're going to be with the kingdom and inherit the kingdom, and it'll be forever and ever. And these 4 beasts, particularly the last one, is not going to prevail. So that's the good news. And he says, I'd like to know more about it. Again, he said it's dreadfully terrible. And there's 10 heads, 10 horns. And then there was another horn which came up, and he was a person, and he was greater than his fellows. So he became the guy. Okay, now it says that when he came up, the 10 went to 7.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that he comes up, not amongst he wasn't original 10, but he's there in the system. And somehow he has 3 of them become no longer leaders. And he steps into that place. Now, he's not the Antichrist yet, because there's still all these other kings. And remember, as John would portray it, he said it's one kingdom, because he described it as one kingdom, separate kingdom, but 10 kings. That's why it's not Rome, it's not Greece, it's not Russia, it's not China, because it's not a single head. It's a kingdom with 10 heads.
Interesting.
And it's worldwide. So
and that makes more sense with the one world government.
Right. With one world government, and there's one group of people that are running things as leaders of this.
Okay.
And he says the one that becomes the Antichrist comes up, not amongst the original 10, and then he gets 3 to be replaced by him. Okay, now the interesting thing is that it's not by force. Because if it's by force, and they saw, wait a minute, this guy is doing a power grab, what would the other 6 or 7 do?
The others would bow up and fight him on that.
Yeah, they would.
Right?
They would say, "Wait a minute, no, we're not going to let you do that." They willingly accept it. So, however it's done, it's clever, and it seemed like, "Oh yeah, sure, that makes sense. That's a good idea. That's beneficial." Because they ultimately all the rest of them are going to go too. but they don't see it that way because he in the world willingly accepts it. And then he says that little horn. Now remember, at this point, he's not the Antichrist yet.
Right. So this is in the first 3.5 years?
First 3.5 years.
Okay.
In verse 21, he's making war against the saints and prevailing against them. Okay, two things about that. It's not the beast itself. It's him. He's decided that I'm going to come against people of faith. And I'm going to make war with them because I have power now and I can. Remember, this is after he's taken care of the other three.
Right.
He's not part of he is part of the beast, but he is specifically, I'm going to go after Christians. And interesting enough, it says he actually succeeds and comes against us. Okay, now, we have a little bit of a picture of that. Think about Christians when Jesus set up the church. There was in Israel, Jerusalem, there was a group called the Pharisees.
Right. And
they thought they're a threat to our system and our religion and what we believe. And remember, they had completely rejected that Christ was the Messiah.
Right.
And that they believed it was just something that wasn't, in their mind, they're saying, well, this isn't godly because they don't worship, Jehovah and Abraham and the law and all that. So we are going to, basically have a system that they're going to have a hard time with. Okay, that was true, but it didn't really impact them in a great way, other than new and kind of nuisances.
Right.
That we'd like you to stop doing that. We're not going to do that. Okay, we're gonna speak against you. Okay, it doesn't matter. Well, ultimately, a Pharisee decided, I'm going after him. Who was that? Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And Paul says, I personally am going to snuff it out.
Yeah, Saul at that time.
Saul, and became Paul. Saul. I'm going after it. And so
and with great gusto.
He was within the system. He wasn't head of the system. But he was a leader in the system. And he personally said, I'm going after it. And he did. And I'm going to capture him, and I'm going to arrest him, and I'm going to see if I can get him taken care of. And I believe when it says he's making war against the saints and prevailing, my thought about that picture is it's probably like what Saul did, is that Saul didn't go out and actually kill people himself. But what he did do is get people thrown in the jail. He did have them stop. He did have them challenged. And I have things against you, and I'm going to try to capture you to have that happen. And it was a person, and said, well, that's the person of the Antichrist, that while the system isn't purpose, I mean, they're against him, but they're not directly coming against him on every front. Well, the Antichrist does.
Okay, that's interesting.
And by the way, ultimately, because he's an agent of Satan,
right.
What does Satan want to do? Eliminate Christianity, complete all Christianity, all semblance of the Holy Spirit on earth. Okay, the next interesting thing is he says, remember, this is during the first 3.5 years. I'm making war against the saints. Okay, so who's here? The saints. Maybe the thought of pre-trib rapture.
I was going to say that definitely sheds some doubt on pre-trib rapture,
not,
right?
Be careful. Be careful, because we're not gone. Because if we were gone, there wouldn't be anybody.
Who would be there for this,
right?
Anybody,
and the Jews that become believers by mid-trib, they're not considered saints. So he's making war against believers.
Interesting.
And that means we're here. And so that's one of the that's one of the thoughts about. Are you so sure that it's pre-trib rapture? This verse says, maybe not. And again, because it's not clear in Scripture, I can't absolutely say, well, of course it's not.
Right.
It just implies, maybe not. So be
that
careful.
It may not be, right.
And then he says, he's going to, that little horn's going to arise. He will be different than the first ones. He'll subdue. So he's going to be different either than the 10. I'm coming up from amongst the system. I'm not one of the 10 to start with. I step in. I subdue 3 other kings. And I start speaking pompous words against the Most High. So that person, you'll start to recognize, he's speaking against Christians. He's speaking against God of Christians, Jesus.
Right.
He's speaking against it. And pompous words is that you guys can't stop me because I have the power, and I'm arrogant and prideful, and I'm going to speak it. And he said, I'm going to persecute the saints of the Most High with an intention to change times and law. Okay, so if I'm changing the law, what does that mean I'm doing? I'm restructuring it all.
Right. Right.
So all the things that you were part of are going to be obsolete, and I'm creating a new system, a new approach, a new times, a new economic system, a new set of laws, and I'm going to do this for times and a half a time, which is 3.5 years, so that he's involved here during that first 3.5 years of having the beast, which is the system, and we'll talk more about this. It's not the Antichrist. The Antichrist becomes the head of the beast, and he does it by, I'm coming from within, get rid of 3, start coming against Christians, start setting
Very
up a new set of law, and he becomes the mover of it all, but not yet the decision maker ultimately of everything yet.
Okay.
So there's a difference between the beast and the Antichrist, and we're going to find out later that it's the harlot, the cabal, that created the beast in the first place. And they didn't create the Antichrist. He actually comes along the way. He's just part of the system, and he's, interesting enough, not even a leader of the system when it starts. So it's really going to be interesting to see.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
We'll pick this up again next time, particularly as we get into more of Daniel and then Revelation. But the conversation is about the beast, the Antichrist. How does it work? What happens to us? And we're going to get to the big question: the mark of the beast.
Right.
What does that look like?
And this is important to know. This is so important.
How are we going to handle that, and
right.
what may be required of us, and how are we going to live it out?
And then how do we navigate life without that? Yeah.
Going to be interesting.
So very good. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Always interesting, great conversations. So if this has brought up questions for you, feel free to send them in at questions@afjministry.com,
yep.
and we will be happy to address them.
Yeah,
so
we'd
thanks
be
so
happy
much
to.
for joining us. Looking forward to hearing more.
Yep. We'll see you soon.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.